I am passionate about discipleship. And you know who else was passionate about discipleship? Jesus was passionate about discipleship. In Matthew chapter 28, we see where he gives his final command to his disciples. And he says, "Go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey all commands that I've given you. And surely I will be with you even until the end of the age, teaching you to obey all the commands." I'll tell you something, commands are something that a king gives. How do we follow his teachings like that? You know, when I came to faith in Christ, I was a mom of 2 young children. And as I started to learn more about Jesus and his word, I was so excited when I opened the pages to Matthew 28, to Titus 2, where we hear about the older men training up the younger men and the older women training up the younger women. I thought, okay, here we go. I was so excited. But where was she? I had a lot of amazing women in our church body who were fantastic at giving me little bits of wisdom and little bits of their life. That it was very encouraging. It was very organic. And that's how I matured. That's how I was discipled. But I wonder sometimes how much more quickly I would have matured in the faith had there been a woman who loved Jesus and followed his commands of making disciples and teaching the younger women. If she had been alongside me, how much more would I have learned a little bit easier than a lot of the stumbling that I did. And that's why I'm passionate about discipleship for women, because I want this next generation of women to have somebody that can help them trust and follow Jesus. That's it. So I have to share this story with you. There's a story about 3 soldiers who have just completed a very, very hard battle on the battlefield. And they are sitting around a fire warming themselves, and they're talking about the day's events. And in encouraging one another, they start to share about who was that one soldier that was the most excellent? Who was the one that just stood out in that day's battle? And the first soldier, he says, wow, I know who it was. It was the man that I saw run in front of enemy fire, protecting his friend. He was wounded. He was the man. He was the most excellent soldier. And his friend sitting with him around the fire, he said, no, I'm sorry, I don't agree. I saw the most excellent soldier on the battlefield today. He was the one that just crawled on his belly and went from wounded to wounded, helping those he could help. He was the one that was the most excellent. And then the third soldier, he said, you know, guys, you're both wrong. I saw the most excellent soldier on the battlefield. He was the one that led the charge. He's the one that led us into battle today. Well, standing behind them was their commanding officer. And he said, gentlemen, he said, all of you are mistaken. I'm the one who saw the most excellent soldier on the battlefield. He was the one that was standing, and he had his rifle aimed and ready. His finger was on the trigger. And just as he went to pull that trigger, the sound of the general's trumpet to retreat blasted loud across that battlefield. And he didn't delay. He took his finger off that trigger. He lowered his arm and he lowered his rifle, never firing a shot. That was the most excellent soldier, the one who was obedient to his commander. I'll tell you something, discipleship is that spot where we get to touch somebody else's life and teach them how to obey. We don't need to be perfect because we already know the one who is, and we lean on him for help. Obedience is God's love language. David Young, in his book, King Jesus, he says, in a kingdom, the king's word is the final authority. Is King Jesus your final authority? I know he's mine. And because I love King Jesus, I want to follow his teachings and his commands. And because I want to follow his teachings and commands, I disciple women. Obedience is God's love language. In John 14:15, Jesus says these words, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. Do you love him? Do you love Jesus? My husband Paul and I have been married now for almost 23 years. I would love to say that we have got it all figured out. No, we still need Jesus on a regular basis. And I'll tell you something, we are still wired differently after 23 years. My husband Paul and I are two different love language type of people. My greatest love language is words of affirmation. I love words of affirmation, encouragement. If my husband leaves a sticky note or writes something down in a card, I'm like over the moon. I am like filled up. That is what I need. Words of encouragement are not my husband's thing. My husband is an acts of service guy. And what that means is he is filled up if I surprise him by washing the car or cleaning out the refrigerator or organizing the pantry. All of those things I hate to do. I do not love any of them, not at all. But I love my husband. And because I love my husband, I want to love him back. And so I do those things. Same as with the Lord. Do you love him? Then we obey his commands. I know some of you ask this question a lot. Well, how do I teach others to trust and follow Jesus? It's called obedience-based discipleship. It is one of the elements of helping to train others up and teach them about Jesus, how he lived, how he loved, and following. We follow him and they follow us. And I like to say, I must practice what Jesus teaches before I preach what Jesus practices. I must practice what Jesus teaches before I teach what Jesus practices. And that's what a disciple maker does. We practice following Jesus and bring others up with us. That's what we do. The last command that King Jesus gives us is again in Matthew 28, when he says, "Go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey all my commandments, and surely I'll be with you." How do you trust and follow Jesus? How do you raise up disciples? You follow him, and you know he's with you. You can do all things through him because he's the one strengthening you. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about him working through us. And because I love Jesus, I want to follow his teachings and his commands. And because I want to follow his teachings and commands, I disciple women. How about you? Who are you discipling?